He is known as the banker who can't stay out of the headlines. He joined a sinking ship, a bank which was bailed out by the government. But under him it made a £900 million profit in just a few years. But is that the real story behind the economy?
There is a significant amount of uncertainty on the UK economy.
Will technology take away our jobs? Or is it just an unreasonable fear?
People worry that jobs are going to get taken away by technology, but activities will get taken away.
How a father of 5 is changing an industry where women representation was few and far between. He was accused of withholding information.
I was accused by the Treasury Select Committee of lying to them.
He is also the man under whom the Royal Bank of Scotland saw its first profit after a decade. They are the visionaries who shape our financial industry.
If you had to start a bank from scratch today, what would it look like?
Good afternoon. Well, if I had to start a bank from scratch today and thinking about the future and what customers require, I would start by being very customer-centric in the sense of understanding exactly which customer needs my bank would serve. Because one of the things that I think is that with the current, if you want, regulatory environment, interest rate environment, and capital requirements, banks have found out that they cannot be everything to everyone, and therefore they have to focus, specialize, and decide where they can create competitive advantages.
Okay, what is the competitive advantage of Lloyds today?
So Lloyds, based on these 3 points I just told you, Lloyds, which has the additional advantage versus a new bank of having fantastic brands over more than 300 years, a fantastic customer base, and a great group of people. The people in Lloyds, the colleagues are fantastic. Lloyds tries to have, as I told you, a very, very strong digital approach, but within a multi-channel concept. So we have the largest digital bank in the UK with more than 15 million digital customers, out of which almost 10 million use the bank through the mobile app. But at the same time, we have the largest branch network and a very significant call center approach that customers can interact with us in a multi-channel way. On top of that, we have a multi-brand approach as well, which is an additional layer of segmentation. So we have the Lloyds brand, we own the Halifax brand, Bank of Scotland brand, Scottish Widows in insurance, and MBNA in credit cards. And that is an additional way of addressing better the evolving customer needs through a multi-brand segmentation approach.
So is mass critical?
Well, mass is critical in certain aspects. So on one hand, and this is, I think, one of the biggest evolving trends in banking nowadays, is that you have to, as I said, focus on your customers better, and therefore you need to segment and address their evolving needs constantly, and the digital bank enables you to segment in a much easier way because the cost of providing an offering through the digital bank is much cheaper than through other types of approaches. But at the same time, given that the environment is tough and competition is increasing, you have to have a low operating cost model, as I told you. And in terms of lower operating cost model, the advantage of having a large number of customers and a large number of transactions may decrease your unitary cost, which is very important.
But what's your biggest fear? Is it being disrupted? How do you know how millennials or the generation after them will bank?
Well, my biggest focus in the bank is to make sure that we deliver our plans appropriately. So Lloyds is the largest retail and commercial bank in the United Kingdom. We have, as I told you, multi-brand and a multi-channel approach, and we focus the bank on the real economy. So we focus the bank on families, on small and medium-sized businesses, and on insurance. So we don't do basically anything else. We have sold all other activities like asset management, international private banking, our international activity to focus the bank where we could have a competitive advantage in the real economy in the United Kingdom. That is our, if you want, our raison d'être. And we have a purpose beyond providing banking services, which is to try to help the country prosper. That is our mission, to help Britain prosper.
I understand multi-channel. If you go to the person on the street and ask them to bank with you, they may not understand multi-channel. How would you simply sell your bank to a person that's trying to open a bank account or do something else at the age of 16? First, what's your primary target? Is it getting them early, or is it a little bit later? Is it the second or third bank account?
Well, our purpose is to serve our customers well, and as I told you, to give them an offering that satisfies their needs. Yeah. And within those offerings, we have offerings for students, so to your point, to get them early, as we have offers for example, couples that live in cities and have good incomes but need to buy a house which is very expensive in cities and therefore they have specific needs, or for older people that are concerned about how they are going to finance their pension and their future after they don't work anymore. So it's a segmented approach, and we have close to 30 million customers, and we want to serve them all well and appropriately through the multi-brand and multi-channel approach. And when you ask me, how do I explain the multi-channel approach? It's very easy, man. You have the bank in your pocket, and you can use it how many times you want a day. It's free. But if you have, for example, if you want to buy your first house, and you need a mortgage to buy your first house, you want a human interaction, you want advice, you want to hear what other people do, what you should try, how you should compare it. And to provide mortgages is something which we specialize in also through our branch network. And we are actually increasing the number of advisors through our branch network, which I think in our case is a competitive advantage. To give you an example, another one would be our partnership with Schroders, where we are going to provide advice for people that are looking to consider how they are going to improve their pension in the future, how they're going to invest their savings. That is also something which is a very important decision for people, and where a human interaction is important.
What will Lloyds look like in 5 or 10 years?
So Lloyds is now very focused about being successful in a digital world. Mm-hmm. People are interacting with us exponentially through the mobile app or through PCs in general. To give you an idea, we have now on the mobile app 22 customer interactions per month, which is huge, more than double what we had 3 years ago. And that has a big advantage given that we have the largest digital bank in the UK. We are investing massively in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of risk programs, in terms of customer behavior, in order to understand what customers want. And the fact that they interact with us in an exponential mode enables us to quicker know what they want and be able to offer them the products and services they need, when they need, in transparent conditions and at fair prices. So that is a big advantage of this digital world where customers interact with banks or other companies in a constant way.
You've been chief executive since 2011. What are you most proud of?
Well, when I joined the bank in 2011, the bank was very different than what it is today, because as you know, the bank has been intervened.
Very different.
Yeah. The UK government, given Lloyd's acquisition of HPOS, the UK government had to inject around £20 billion into the bank, making them a 43% shareholder. And within the financial crisis, the bank had £100 billion of special liquidity assistance from the Bank of England, and around £200 billion of additional net debt. So what was critical in Lloyds at the time was to refocus the bank in the United Kingdom and make it competitive and make it help the country prosper, and on the other hand to completely address the financial situation of the bank. And 8 years later, we have zero net debt in the bank. We have one of the highest capital levels of any bank in the world. And we have repaid all the taxpayers' money and almost £1 billion on top of that, which was a moment of huge pride for all the colleagues in the bank. And we are absolutely now focused on our third strategic plan to make Lloyds successful in a digital world, which is the future.
Did you have to change the culture? And was that the toughest part? Or was that get the numbers under control?
No, get the numbers under control and address the balance sheet was a critical and very important thing to do quickly, but not the most difficult, because the culture, and to make the bank absolutely customer focused, and to make the bank also cost conscious and investing for the future, the cultural shift is something which takes much more time, because culture by definition is something that you acquire after a long time. So in order to change it, you have to allow also time to go by. And in order to do that, I also had to change a few people, and I had to be very visible, communicating to my staff what our values were, what our goals were, and how we should run the bank together in order to refocus it on customers and make it an efficient and also profitable bank to give taxpayers money back.
So what is your advice? A lot of companies, banks or others, have to change a culture from within. What's the chief executive's role? Did you meet people every day? Was there a video address? It's the most difficult, but also the most difficult thing to see exactly how you do it. How concretely did you change the culture?
Right, so I think number one, I think your leadership style should be, to your question, should be appropriate to the moment where you are and to the situation of the company. So given that Lloyds was under severe stress, you obviously had to take decisions more quickly in terms of trade-off of outcomes versus process. Outcomes had to be privileged, and you needed people and you need a leadership team that would, together with you, change the bank, because you don't change companies alone. I think CEOs have to be more and more team-orientated, and they have to hire, coach, and retain great people that together disseminate the culture that you want for the organization. So the first thing is to select the right people. And to give you an example in relation to that, I spent a lot of my time interviewing all the top 2 candidates that will report to my direct reports, which is a lot considering that I have 12 direct reports and each of them has 10 to 12 as well. So I interview all top 2 candidates because I want to make sure that they have the right values and they are the right examples, role models for young people in the bank to aspire to be like them, number one. And number 2, I want those people to understand that as they come into the bank or are promoted to report into my direct reports, they become corporate citizens and not only divisional citizens. So that is one of the main functions, I believe, of a leader in the modern world. You have to be very focused on people and creating great teams.
You've worked for an American bank, for a Spanish bank, and for
right.
actually two UK banks. Is it different working for for different cultures, banks?
It is different, and it is different not only. It is not only different to compare a Spanish culture with an American culture, it is also different to compare the culture 20 years ago with the culture today, because things are evolving, values are evolving, and as a leader, you also have to adapt yourself to different cultures. And the fact that I have worked in several countries and I have led different banks made me realize that everything is not absolute, so that you have to be relative about your judgments and understand the pros and cons of situations and using your judgment a lot, because maybe a Spanish culture is more, if you want, prone to take action quickly versus, I would say, a Japanese culture where they take a long time to consider issues, but when they go and execute, then they execute quicker. So I think you have to take things into context, and what is right in a time and what is right in a geography may not be appropriate in another geography or in another context.
Benefit of hindsight. Since 2011, is there anything you would have done differently, either for the Lloyd strategy or within the kind of the wider banking industry landscape?
Well, there are always things with hindsight. I mean, it's very easy on Monday to guess the result of football on Sunday. And with hindsight, there are always things that one thinks it could have done differently or better. But the main thing, which was to set together with a great team the direction of the bank and to hire great people, to continuously coach them, develop them, and retain them, which I think are the biggest if you want, it's the biggest function of a leader. I have done what I thought I should do, and I think Lloyd's results speak for themselves. The bank has been made fit for purpose. We have given taxpayers money back and some more, which was a big achievement and a huge moment of pride for all the staff in the bank. We are absolutely customer-centric. We have the largest digital bank in the country. When digital is the largest, is the fastest growing segment. So being, if you want, an established incumbent bank, we have the largest market share in new business through digital, which is, I think, fantastic.
How do you navigate the UK economy? You're tied to the UK economy, and there could be bumps and rides, and we don't know, where we'll end up because of political decisions in 12, 18 months.
Yeah, you're right. There is a significant amount of uncertainty on the UK economy, and as I just commented recently, the UK economy has been proving to be very resilient, although the uncertainty, if it continues, might affect it. That is, uncertainty is something that markets and the economy in general don't like, so it's important that this uncertainty disappears. But the fact is, the economy is very resilient. You have GDP growing between 1 and 1.5%. Employment levels in the UK are at the highest ever since you have statistics, and unemployment is the lowest level since, I believe, 1975. You have low interest rates, therefore the quality of assets in the balance sheet of banks is high. The world economy is growing at a slower pace, but still growing, according to the IMF, at around 3.3% for this year, which is a healthy pace. So you have good conditions for the economic growth to continue. But you have important uncertainty areas. Another one is trade between the US and China, but also between US and other regions, which is important to address appropriately. So I would classify the economy as resilient, with good fundamentals, but with important areas of uncertainty, which, as an expected outcome, should go reasonably well, but might not go as well. So it's important to be prudent.
But how do you deal also with a political party, one of the major political parties here in the UK, that has taken a turn for the left, and that could actually impose transactions? I mean, is it a tough environment to be a chief executive in or a banker in when you actually don't know what Labour will do?
No, I mean, I don't think my function as chief executive is very much influenced by politics. Lloyds is the largest retail and commercial bank in the country. We have dealt in the past with all governments. We'll deal with the present government, with all future governments. Our objective is to serve our clients in the best possible way and to interact and deal with regulators or politicians or other stakeholders, irrespective of which parties they belong to. I think we have a common goal. If you want, one of the additional beauties, I think, of Lloyd's strategy, by being focused in the UK and on the real economy of the UK, is what we want is the best for the UK economy. What is best for the UK economy is best for Lloyds and vice versa. And this alignment of interests, I think it's really important and really good in terms of our interaction with the UK society in general.
Apart from executing your plan, what's your biggest concern, or what do you focus and spend most of your time on? Is it finding the right leaders to possibly succeed you one day? Is it more diversity, or is it something else?
So I spend a lot of time, as I told you, on hiring, coaching, developing, retraining, and keeping people. But I spend also a lot of time going throughout the country, communicating our values and culture, as I told you. I interact significantly with investors, with politicians, regulators, and their stakeholders. And that's more or less how I would assign my time, a third. But my main worry, apart from executing our plan well, because execution is really important. I mean, as Roosevelt said, you have to constantly have your eyes on the stars, with your feet firmly on the ground. So you have to make sure that you know where you want to go. But everything that is being done day to day goes in the right direction. That is critically important. I have several worries which are risks that we have to manage. For example, cyber risks. We invest heavily on cyber risks, and we think we are on the top quartile of banks in general, but it's a risk we can never say doesn't exist. So we can only invest more, step up our defenses, but it's a risk which you can never avoid, to give you an example.
How do you measure success?
Well, in the bank, we measure success through a plan.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
the
our
bank. How do you measure success?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, the most important criteria for me of measuring success is to see how the people that I interact directly with, how they develop themselves. And as I was telling you, they become not only better professionals, but better people. So I try to develop them, as I was telling you, by stretching them to the limit of their abilities, but also helping them in their decision process. And I always stay by them. So I give them accountability, I give them obviously responsibility, otherwise they cannot be accountable. And I am demanding, because I think only when you have demanding goals, you achieve superior results. But they know if they do something wrong, I am behind them and I am the ultimate responsible.
Where do you
That's
see
my job as a coach.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I see myself continuing to developing the bank and creating high performance teams and focus the bank in providing better and better offerings to our customers. That's what I like to do. I am more than a banker. I am a CEO specializing in banking. This is what I like to do. I started working in banking more than 30 years ago, and that's what I like to do. So I'm exactly doing what I like, and that's what I see me continue doing.
Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Nigel Wilson, thank you so much for speaking to Bloomberg and being here on Leaders. L&G has such a diverse business, pension savings, investments, real estate. How do you measure success?
I think I measure success in 2 or 3 different ways. One is the development of people, I think, comes first, because talent really matters, and we have very highly motivated, highly talented people. And one of the great things that we've achieved in the last few years is outstanding people. Yes, we've had great results, but actually the results are a consequence of the great people and the implementation, the excellent execution of the strategy. And so that's
okay,
really
how do you motivate people then?
Well, people enjoy doing what we do because they emotionally engage with our purpose, and people believe that we have a very important purpose because we're doing such outstanding things to make a difference to lots of people's lives. And we're not a trading operation that's trying to make daily or hourly or weekly profits. We're looking at the very long term, and as a consequence of that, developing economic activities which actually provide solutions for the very long term in a very holistic sense.
But so you're talking about pensions. Are we saving enough for our pensions?
We're certainly not saving enough for our pensions anywhere, and that's one of the challenges that society has, because not only do we need to save more, we need to get a better return on what we've been saving. And in a QE environment, very low interest rate environment, we've had to come up with some more innovative solutions which actually align to the real economy and driving real growth.
Okay, but if there's a pension deficit, who should pay for it?
Well, I think it's a sharing between the employer and the employee, and that's the model that we've got moving forward. And we as an employer have to recognise that we have to step up, but also individuals have to step up. But as a business, we also have to step up, because we have to find investments that deliver really good long-term returns to people and educate people on why it's the right thing to do.
How will your business change in the next 10 years? We talk about AI, we talk about robots taking over, we talk about doing everything digitally when it comes to insurance. What do you think is the biggest transformation for you?
I think the biggest thing for us is we'll be able to do a lot more things with the same amount of people because of the application of technology. And people worry that jobs are going to get taken away by technology, but activities will get taken away, and a lot of boring, mundane activities will get taken away. But lots of great new jobs are going to be created, and lots of new opportunities are going to be created. That's what's happened for the last 200 years. And every time there's a technological leap, people get very fearful about jobs. The UK has got more jobs now than it's ever had in the history of time. It's got 32.6 million people. It's got more vacancies than it's ever had in the history of time. But actually, people are still worried about technology.
But is it the right jobs? So it could be quality jobs, but if you're not trained for it, then you're going to be displaced.
No, I think that's a really good point. That's why there's all of these vacancies, because we simply haven't trained people up to take advantage of these new opportunities that are being created through the application of technology. So we're all short of lots of skills. And when I wander around the country, the biggest issue that people talk to me about is skill shortages. And if they could get more skills, they could actually grow their business much quicker. And that hasn't been happening for a number of years.
But so whose responsibility again? Is it to either educate or transform or train? the citizens of tomorrow?
No, it's everybody's. It's a collective responsibility, but we certainly have to step up and improve our training. But actually, the universities and the schools need to improve their training to make people have relevant skills. And the world has changed, and therefore you need to change what you're teaching people and change their attitude towards stuff. I mean, the thing that's really struck me traveling around the world is the spirit of entrepreneurship in universities is the highest it's ever been in my life, because they see these wonderful opportunities. They just sometimes don't have the skills to maximize the opportunity.
But is that why we see the rise in populism?
That's part of the reason we see the rise. There are many reasons for that happening. I mean, the most is that we have created a model that isn't inclusive capitalism. It's
right.
It's all about exclusive wealth, and that's not really selling well to the wider population. So people are looking for different types of solutions and looking back in a very nostalgic type of way at history. Things were better 20, 30, 40 years ago. Well, they weren't really, but actually the pace of change has favoured different types of skill sets than other types of skill sets, and people are feeling left behind because they're not well equipped to deal with modern society.
But why? Is that a legacy of the financial crisis? Is it just capitalism that needs to be rethought?
It's capitalism that needs to be rethought, yeah. I don't think it's a legacy of the financial crisis at all, and we try and blame the weather or blame the crisis for lots of things, and it's nothing to do with that. I think there's lots of new skills required. We haven't created the infrastructure to create lots of those skills. Universities, schools, employers like ourselves need to transform themselves to create more relevant skills and more ambition amongst people, so that they can see a path to prosperity for themselves.
Do you worry that countries like the UK, but also the US to a certain extent, and a lot of European ones, have either a south-north divide or a kind of Midwest, East and West Coast divide?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I think it's very sad that that's been allowed to happen. I mean, we're sitting in this wonderful building in London, which is, I think the best city in the world to live in, but we've neglected the rest of the cities and towns in Britain for the last 30 or 40 years, and part of our mission has been to actually put money in these places and help them grow. And it's the same in America. You've got so many flyover states and so many great cities, but actually many others that have fallen behind. And
Nigel, you're really a champion actually of a lot of the regeneration in the north. When did you realize that that was a necessity for almost holding this country together?
Yeah, I mean, that was after the crash, when I really thought about, going back to my training as an economist many years ago at MIT, and it was so obvious that London had got ahead of everywhere else and everywhere else had fallen behind, and for the UK to really prosper, all the great cities of the north, and indeed of the south as well, needed a lot more capital put into them. And that capital could deliver extraordinary returns because there was such a large catch-up potential. And people had to realise that actually you couldn't just sit here waiting for the man from Whitehall to go north and say, actually, we see these problems, here's how we can solve them. There's enough problems here for people to solve without having to go to Edinburgh and Glasgow and Leeds and Newcastle and Manchester. But we went on that journey and we've made a difference.
Okay, where do you see the biggest problem for the UK?
The biggest problem, we have a huge infrastructure deficit. America's got a bigger one actually, but the UK has got 150 billion in housing, 100 billion in energy, 100 billion in transport, a massive education deficit, and a big regeneration, and a digital deficit. And that capital is all available, but it's sitting on the sidelines. What we have to do is become this...
Why? Why is it sitting on the sidelines?
I think because it's new. We haven't been investing in these towns and cities and doing these big projects for a very long period of time. I mean, America's got some great examples. Austin, Texas is fantastic. Boston is doing a great job. Lots of cities have been on this journey, and there's a handful around the world that have been amazingly successful, including in China. The Chinese have an authoritarian solution to actually making this stuff happen. In a democracy, it's proven very difficult because we've tended to have quite a confrontational political ideology type of model, which is very hard to get things done. And we want very much to have a collaborative model so that everybody realises we have a common goal. How do we all work together to achieve those goals?
So how much are you doing in infrastructure, and how much are you actually doing also with these modular houses, right? So it's almost like a flat pack that you can roll out.
No, I think the big thing is in infrastructure. We've spent 15 billion already, and we've proved the concept works. It's taken 15 billion to do that, but actually it definitely works. We now need to figure out how do we scale that up and use the fact that we have 3,200 pension funds and sovereign wealth funds as clients. They want to do the same thing. They've got a lot of their money in low-yielding assets. How do we move that money into real assets, creating real jobs that pay real and improving wages and develop real skills for people? And
how long does it take to see the fruits? Because that's one of the concerns that I keep on hearing about infrastructure, is that you put 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, but it also takes a long time to actually see the returns.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that's just that everybody creates barriers for not doing things, and it just you create a pipeline. We created our pipeline really 7 or 8 years ago after the financial crisis, and now it's huge, a huge pipeline. We've had double-digit growth in EPS and DPS and a 20% plus ROE. So something says that we're doing something right, and it is the fact that we've had this very long-term view. And yes, there will be some infrastructure projects that are 30, 40, 50 years, but we have liabilities that are 30, 40, 50 years, and we're matching those assets with those liabilities, and that results in a great solution for everyone.
So you started doing this 7 years ago. Do you think there are more chief executives now looking at longer term infrastructure, or less because of the crisis we're going through?
I think people, it doesn't have to be chief executives. It can be pension funds. It can be the mayors of cities. It can be the chief executives of councils. You need a critical mass of people who have a common interest. They don't all have to be chief executives by any means, but actually it helps.
But has it gotten worse or better?
I think it's getting better. I think it's definitely getting better. I think a lot of people have lent into Brexit, and one of the things that surprised everyone is actually employment's at an all-time high, vacancies are at an all-time high, and the economy's grown about the same as Europe anyway over the last few years. And so people have lent in to Brexit, realising that actually they can't just sit around and do nothing.
So what do investors misunderstand about maybe the northern UK, some of these parts which are less known to investors?
They just have to get out and visit. I mean, the thing I always say to politicians, if you keep living in the London bubble, all you meet is like-minded individuals, and you've got to walk around in the other guy's shoes and go and visit these places, look and talk to people, and actively listen. Because lots of the solutions, they're not our solutions. Many times we walked in and we found the Vice-Chancellor of the university has had a dream, great vision, but actually having the levers to pull to make stuff happen and the capital to make stuff happen has been very difficult. So we have often bought into other people's vision because it's better than ours, and actually said, that's a great idea, we'll support that, we will make that happen.
So I was told in your office there's a bookshelf with many different books.
Indeed.
What do you have on there?
I have everything. I think I have very...
Marx?
From Marx and Keynes and Schumpeter and all the classics, as well as lots of modern books. I gave up sleep many years ago and decided that reading was a. But I've always been intellectually curious, and the fact that I'm intellectually curious has resulted in lots of people acting as great mentors to me. I feel very privileged that I have wonderful people who've spent disproportionate amount of their lives helping me, and that's why people come first, because actually I got lucky in life, and from my junior school teachers when I was 6 or 7 and until back today, even there's still people mentoring me.
How have your 5 daughters actually shaped the person you are?
Immensely, actually, because family comes first, and I wanted to be a good dad, and my daughters are all very strong-willed and have been very demanding over the life. But actually, seeing through their lens as they grow up, the restrictions to a certain extent on the opportunities that presented themselves to them, meant that I had first-hand experience of what it's like, in effect, to be a woman, trying to get on in a modern world, and all the barriers you have to overcome to get to the top. And that's in part why we developed our 50-50 by 2020 program.
And how, so the 50-50 is 50% of senior managers being women by 2020?
Yes.
How do you actually attract the talent? So is it inside, is it outside?
I think it's all of the above, but actually it became a great message and a powerful message internally. In fact, one of the most difficult management challenges I had was I wanted 12 of our senior women to be role models, and I wanted a photograph and a little narrative on them and put it right across the firm, actually trying to persuade them to do it. They all went, other people were much better, whereas if I asked the guys, I'd have 50 of them pounding on my door telling me that they were the guy, and they wanted their photo, and this was their photo, and it would be at the top. But so that there's a totally different approach, but actually they've seen the power that has, that people have got to the top. You know, we have 7 divisions, 4 of those divisions, the CEO of those divisions is a woman now.
Will that change? I mean, do people actually actively try to work for you because of that?
I think that's true. I think we've become a magnet for talent, and people, and lots of women see that actually L&G is a great place to come and work. And we're not just an actuarial firm or a fund management firm. There are lots and lots of different jobs for people.
Do you see that changing the industry as a whole? If you look at insurance, it's probably one of the industries that is the most behind when it comes to modernization in many ways.
Gosh.
That's fair, isn't it?
I don't think that's fair at all.
Really?
I think we've moved on dramatically. Our biggest divisions, some of our biggest divisions, insurance-related divisions, are also run by women. Some of our best actuaries are women. This role
but that's legal in general. You really think the industry's
No, I think the industry's changing. What's interesting, the pension risk transfer business in the UK, which is a huge business, the 3 leading companies, they're all now managed by women. And nobody's ever noticed that actually. I won't even mention the 2 competitors, but they're both run and very successfully run by women. And so that we have changed already. I don't think we've shouted loud enough about the changes that have gone on in our industry, but we've had this goal, we've been on track to deliver that goal, and it's very exciting.
Who's mentored you? Who's been your most important mentor in your life?
I've been very lucky that people have been kind to me since I was very young. I met my primary school teacher for the first time in many, many years, who taught me for 3 years when I was very young, and really coached me in lots of different ways. And it was a wonderful, moving experience because I hadn't seen her for many, many, many years. But she came to an event that I was at and asked me to guess who she was, and I hadn't seen her for 55 years, about 50 years. And so it was a very long time since I'd seen her, and it was just wonderful because it was she'd followed my career over all those years. But I had some very interesting life learning experience. I worked very closely with Bob Shiller when we were at MIT together, and I realized very quickly that one of us would get the Nobel Prize for economics and one of us wouldn't. And
Are you still in contact?
Not really. I think I stayed in the academic world. I realized that actually I was better suited to working in business, and actually I should go and work in business because I didn't have, I wanted to see things happen quicker, and I didn't really want to write dull research reports in effect. I had tremendous commercial experience from Stanley Carms when I was group commercial director of the Dixons and dealing with issues around the world. I worked for McKinsey. So many of the partners took a real interest in my career. I was the first sort of PhD from MIT they'd hired, and I think they had a curiosity as to what this person could contribute towards the firm, but I got a lot out of it.
Who's the person you admire the most?
I don't know whether I have a single person that I really admire the most. I admire people in different situations, different walks of life who've made a bigger contribution, who have the right values and behaviours, because some of my heroes might be sports people, but don't necessarily have the right behaviours. And similarly, people have made a huge political difference to people's lives, but again, they might not have had the right behaviours. So there isn't a single person who at this moment I'd say, wow, that they're so inspirational.
What does it mean being a leader in 2019? Is it different to being a leader in 1999 because of the changes we're going through?
Absolutely. I think the world has changed, and I think the sort of command and rule authoritarian approach that we saw in the past and silo-driven organisations has gone now, and that you have to form an organisation that's about collaboration, that's about teamwork, it's about visible shared accountability, and people want that accountability and responsibility, and you have to have a real purpose. I think businesses will struggle if the people who work for them can't be emotionally engaged in what they're trying to achieve and their purpose. And Bloomberg's a good example of that, where you are the DNA of business.
But how do you translate that DNA to your employees?
Well, I visit every office in the world every year to try and meet everyone who works for us. So everybody has an opportunity to talk to me, and to see me physically isn't just a corporate video going out. We do that as well, of course, but actually I want that engagement, and I want people to listen to what I have to say, but also question me and put me on the spot, and so that they have that visible physical discussion, and that people feel as though that therefore that they're being listened to, and that we then listen to what they've said and we action it and make better outcomes for them at work, but actually for society as well.
So what's the best piece of feedback you've ever received, or advice?
The best piece, I think, about actively listening. You know, I think the MIT McKinsey background made me a little bit intellectually arrogant, and I've turned that into intellectual curiosity, which I always had, but I'm much more tolerant, and as a consequence of that, and I engage better than I used to. And so, because there are lots of ways of looking at things, and you need that diversity, and over time we've created a lot more diversity in the workplace, and as a consequence of that you can become a better leader by listening to others, and it makes a difference.
Is there something you don't like about your job, or a particular difficult day that you don't want to happen again?
Well, I think the regulatory burden of financial services is at times can be slightly overwhelming, because that is really the legacy of the financial crisis, and we're still on the naughty step in a sense. So there's a huge regulatory burden put on us, but we have to become a trusted industry. I think that Legal & General is a globally trusted brand, but we have to be a trusted industry, and we've still got some way to go on that. But once we solve the pension crisis, the housing crisis, the infrastructure crisis, and actually help to create lots of real new, high-paying jobs, then trust will increase exponentially.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't really want to have a legacy. I mean, in a sense that I'm happy with everything that Legal & General has achieved, but actually I never think about my legacy at all. I think I would like people who worked for me and worked with me to say it was great working with Nigel. And actually, if people can remember me as a good person to work with, then that would be fantastic for me.
Would you ever go into politics?
I'm always asked that. I've been asked that question since I was 11, actually, when I used to go knock on doors and canvass various things as this midget 11-year-old. I think people used to find this very, very unusual. And I was chairman of the youth club at 12, and I sat on the village hall committee at 12 and 13.
So you're telling me yes?
No,
you were made for politics?
No, I'm not made for politics at all. I'm made for business. But I like to have engagement with politicians. Politicians have very difficult lives and don't have enough levers to pull. I have lots of levers to pull that can make a difference, and I think we've made it very difficult for politicians to do that. So I've got no interest at all in being a politician, but I've got a huge interest in helping politicians and others deliver better societal outcomes.
The UK government still owns 62% of your shares. How difficult is it to find investors given Brexit?
Well, the last time the government sold 7% they sold it at £2.71. Today we're trading more around $2.15 to $2.20. So it makes it a lot more difficult for the government to say, is that a good sale price for our stock? The answer at this stage would probably be no, but it's their shares, not mine. So they have to sell at a price, and they've said that they do want to exit out by 2023, 24. So there's a lot of stock to be sold given they own 62.5%. But it has shown the impact on banking stocks in particular that uncertainty drives, and it pushes your share price back. We've seen investors from offshore quietly saying there are other markets we can look at the moment for investment into equity stocks, and it has hurt.
When do you think the next sale of shares will be?
Well, in the last review the government did at their budget time said that's unlikely to between now and the end of March. That came out of their review, but they look to resume in their next financial year. Remembering they have sold 7% in the last fiscal year. So I look at the moment at the price it's at, I think it would be a difficult sale, but as I say, it's their shares, not mine.
How's the search for the CFO going?
Really good. It's been an interesting search because when you look around the industry at the moment, there's been a lot of movement in the CFO community over the last 18 months. So we've done a thorough search both in the UK and internationally. Some parts internationally, we won't be bringing candidates in because they're paid so much higher overseas in some markets, but we've done a very, very strong search. We're getting
almost announced?
We're hopefully getting to the tail end of that, but some good candidates that we've been talking to as well.
And what about a replacement for yourself? When will you step down?
Well, I've said there's a bit of life left in me. We've got lots of things we want to do. We've repaired the bank from a financial perspective. My big challenge now is to get this bank really concentrating on customers, and that's actually the exciting bit of banking is how do you deal much better with customers. And our service levels, I'll be quite open with, we are not where we want to be. But now the full force of our executive team needs to be focused on how do you make this a great bank, not just a good, safe bank.
But what's a bit of life left in you at RBS? Is it 12 months, 18 months?
Well, look, I've said 220 is a nice time. We've got a plan through to 220. And like any CEO and board, we're constantly thinking about the people that we've got inside our organisation. How do you develop them so you've got candidates internally? But for a director role, which the CEO obviously is, and also the CFO, you have to look seriously externally as well as internally to make sure you're getting the best candidates. So whilst you might have good candidates, are they the best candidate to fit what the board thinks the job will be for the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, is it time to have a woman run the bank?
Look, it'd be delighted if we had a woman running the bank, and we've got one very senior executive. I've moved into a deputy CEO role for our NatWest Holdings, which is the big part of the bank. Alison Rose does an amazing job, and she's really reformed the corporate banking business that we've got, and also our private banking business, which is now under Coutts number one in customer service and a good profitable business again, which it wasn't. So I think we've got a lot of very, very good talent coming through the organisation. And as a CEO, one of the great things that I've been able to enjoy is seeing people come through. And when you tap them on the shoulder and say, here's a big role, it's been amazing how many have stepped up and been able to do that. So you've seen that with people like Alison, who was 2 or 3 layers down in our organisation when we first did our review. We've had people like Mark Bailey, who's now running Bow, Chris Marks running our NatWest markets. They were in the capital restructuring of the bank, and we found they're great talent. We've brought them through. We've been able to recruit people from outside. Just recently brought in a new chief risk officer, but the chief risk officer for the bank actually is a woman who was inside the business.
You've launched a standalone digital business bank called Metal. What's the thinking behind it?
Well, there are a number of digital operations that we've got being stood up at the moment. And I'll be quite honest, some of these may or may not work. Like any fintech in the digital fintech space, some will last and some won't. But we've got about 7 digital operations that we're setting up at the moment that some will see the light of day and others won't. Metal being one of them is around an SME proposition that pulls everything together for a small business owner that says all you need is here. And it won't all be produced by us, but we can actually pull it together on behalf of an SME. And if you get into a small business, you can have a look at what they do all day. Most of it is, where do I get my raw materials from and how do I pay for them? What do I do with the cash that still comes in, and remembering it's less and less cash and more, how do I use a merchant terminal? How do I connect that to my payroll? How do I make all the payments that are required through my invoices? So our view is, how do you pull that all together for a business and make it technology driven?
But you're offering the same services now, so what are you trying to achieve? Is it brand recognition? Is it, oh, I'm a small business, I know exactly who to go to?
Well, there's 2 things we're doing. We've got a very large business bank that we are more and more digitising, and at the same time we're also setting up a completely digital bank that actually will sit on the side of the bank and say, for other customers, you can use this as well. And our first proposition out in the marketplace with a little vehicle called Esme, which is a digital lending proposition, was quite interesting. The customers that came to it, 85% were not our customers. There was only about 10 to 15% that were our existing customers that went to that device. So I think there's a place for both in the marketplace. One, a traditional offering that will become digitised, and a completely digitised operation that sits on the side of the bank. And we're also doing that at a personal level as well with a bank called Bow.
Okay, but is this because you're worried about being disrupted? And if you are disrupted, is it the fintech or is it the Facebook and Apples of this world?
Well, what's really exciting is let's disrupt ourselves. And what we're doing is we're learning as much.
Does that really work?
Well, we are learning so much out of this. And I'll give you the example of Esme. When we first looked at Esme and we said, should we or shouldn't we do this? We decided to put a completely digital package in place for customers to download information themselves, all electronic on its assessment of the customer, goes into search records to make sure it's the customers who they are, all done, 15 minutes, and you'd actually have it funded. Now, the traditional bank was about 4 weeks. Now, if you look at the proposition we have for our SME customers, it's about 4 minutes. So what did we learn? Was we learnt from the digital proposition we put up and said, how do we use that inside the bank? And now customers, existing customers, a lot of the activity, they can do it for themselves in 4 minutes, and we fund overnight for them. So it's really disrupting ourselves to do better.
Who do you see as your biggest, if not disruptor, your biggest rival in this space?
Yeah, look, I do think about the financial digital companies that are coming in, but yes, there are some very big players that have massive databases, you know, the Amazons, the Apples, those sort of players in the world. And our job is to actually be really good for customers so they don't have to go to anybody else. And I think, to be fair, the industry here has spent the last 5 to 10 years repairing itself with its mind on itself to fix its own balance sheet and get its liquidity back in place. Now this bank is actually starting to focus on its customers again and quite enjoying it for a change.
Do you think Amazon does want to be a bank? Could they be a bank?
I think there are parts of it that some of these players would like to be, particularly around payments, securing their own business models themselves. And you've seen Apple with their Apple Pay. You're starting to see them thinking about how do we stay connected to our own customers, and that's what we need to do as well. So some will compete and some won't.
Will big banking CEOs actually, come from the tech space in 5-10 years?
I think some of them may, but I think there's a specialised skill in banking that the regulators might find a little bit difficult bringing a technology person to run a bank unless they've had some real financial experience in a bank because of the specialisation and the regulation around it. But you're quite right. The things that my executive team now think about are very firmly around how do you digitise the bank, how do you take it from bricks and mortar to the digital space, which is no different to, I suspect, a lot of other CEOs, be that in the travel industry or be that in even the bricks and mortar retailing space. Unless you can make that transition, I think your business model will be under major threat.
But as you move to digital, are we overbanked? I mean, there seems to be branches, like 25 on each high street. In general, are we going to see a number of, reduction of some of these spaces? Well,
you are seeing it, and I mean, we've taken a lot of criticism for the reduction in our branch network. We started with a branch network that was oversized anyway for the size of our customer base, but we have moved, I think, quite firmly this year to say we needed a smaller footprint because our customers are more and more using their mobile phone to do all their banking. And you've seen the transactions now coming through the mobile phone and online, and even in our business customers in Bankline. I mean, today we launched on the Apple apps site our first Bankline, which is for business customers, the app. And I think we're the first bank, certainly in the UK, to do that. So you're seeing more and more customers using their mobile phone or the online capability to do pretty much all their banking. 80% of our transactions, movement of money for businesses is now done online. 43% of our sales in our retail bank are now done on a digital device.
Right.
So that was 5 years ago nothing to 43%. And unless you make these transitions with your customers, bringing your customers with you as much as you possibly can, I think we'll find ourselves with a very outdated model for a bank.
Regulators seem to also be frustrated with how banks deal with cyber attacks. Yeah. Do banks need to be quicker in dealing with it?
Well, one of the biggest threats and risks for we see from a banking perspective is I'd call cyber and fraud. They sometimes are different, but many times they're the same thing. And we need to protect customers as much as we possibly can. And we are using a number of technology devices that sit behind the scenes to try and identify when customers are having fraud activated on their accounts or they're being pushed into doing some things that they shouldn't. Now we've saved hundreds of millions, but we haven't saved everything.
But cyber is more dangerous, right? Because cyber is also basically it could be information, and you don't know it for like 2-3 years.
Well, you're seeing a number of those instances, and it's not just banks, it's any organisation that holds customers' payment data that it needs to be actually really working through. How do we safely hold this? And we're starting to work with some of our larger customers on this around how can we be helpful, given what we have to do with data, how can we help other companies also hold that data?
I don't know if you have 3 priorities that you absolutely can't mess up in the next 12 months, but if there were 2 or 3 priorities, what would they be?
Well, first off, make it simple for customers. You've got to make it simple for customers.
And this on mobile app, or
mobile,
even
or
branches.
if they're online, or even if you're a big business, how do we make those transactions, and when you actually want to do some borrowing or you need to do a bigger deal, how do you make that really easy for a customer or their finance department to do? And certainly for an individual, how do you just make it easy and intuitive for me to do? So that's the first thing. Second one is keep it safe for them. And we've talked about cyber and fraud. Boy, there are some bad people going after money of clients, and our job is to try and make it as safe as we can for you, that when you're doing something, you know that that's a safe transaction. And because there are some pretty bad things going on out there at the moment where I think unsuspecting people are doing all the things we ask them not to do. And I use this as an example. If you and I were walking down the street, somebody came up to you and said, "I'd like your credit card, and could you give me, please, all your passwords on it, please?" Would you give it to them if you didn't know them?
No, but if I got it in an email form.
That's right, or if you got rung up.
Yeah.
People are giving this information where we keep saying to them, don't do it. So I think the second big thing is around safety. And there are a lot of very good technologies that are starting to help make it safer for customers, but we're not catching everything. Because sometimes customers actually do some strange things that we just don't want them to do, because they get pushed into feel as though they're obliged to do it. My advice to customers, if they're rung up and they're not too sure what's going on, put the phone down. It's your telephone, hang up. Put the thing down, and please use a different device to give one of the secure numbers a ring.
And the third priority?
I think the thing is just have really good products that meet the customer needs, and really good products that are fit for purpose and they do what they say on the tin. And one of the things that we're working very hard on is the old 70 pages of terms and conditions. Forget it. What's the one page in big print that says this is what you're buying, this is what it's good for, and here's how much you pay? So simple, safe, and really good products and service that just meet the customer's needs. How
has the Me Too movement actually changed, the bank? How do you report cases of misconduct differently? Has it changed your recruitment process? What are the differences?
Well, you have to take every whistleblow or any signalling that there is a problem here of people making complaints absolutely seriously, because we have found in our own organisation some things that we weren't happy with, and we've taken very swift action. But you do have to take it seriously. And I think it's about treating people fairly. And that's what we want to do. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female in our organisation.
But is it a procedure? Is it different procedures in place? Is it something that's concrete, or is it just how it's treated?
We have had to do a slight modification around the sort of the Me Too, hashtag Me Too, around how do you actually deal with them internally. So it's different to other probably serious investigations that go through. We have now a specialised group that will deal with that and deal with that very swiftly. So there is a slight modification, but it is around dealing with human beings and doing the right thing.
Is there a byproduct, or one of the concerns that we've heard, that actually women are marginalised because people are concerned about being implicated in something?
Not inside our business. I haven't heard and seen that inside our business. And as we've chatted, we've got a number of senior executives, females, who are just adding value to our business. But I haven't seen that as an issue for us, and I would hope it never becomes an issue for us.
What will you do in the next 5 years?
Well, we'll get the service levels up in the bank, and then who knows what you do after a big gig like RBS. I mean, this has been one of the great global transformations started by Stephen Hester, and then the last 5 years by myself. I mean, this was the biggest bank in the world that we have turned around now. And it's been a big year, 2018. First profit in a decade, first dividend in a decade, the highest engagement scores of our colleagues at work ever.
Yep.
And given all the restructuring that's been going on, that is outstanding to have all our people behind us in a way we've never seen. So I think we're seeing a real resurgence in this business, but the piece that, you know, I've got my mind on it as my executive team, how do we get the service levels up to our customers?
And how do you do that?
Day to day, focus on customers, what's the need of every individual customer, making sure your systems and process support your business, not inhibit your business.
But how can you be a different bank? I mean, the proposition of each bank is, you know, slightly different, but also very similar. How do you stand out?
Well, one of the things at the heart of this organisation, and actually our purpose has been to serve customers well. And I can remember having the conversation when we put that in, it was very much to serve customers, and we actually twisted around and said, no, hell, let's at least be a little bit ambitious on the well. But what's stuck with our colleagues as we've gone through all of this change is around how do we look after customers? And that is something that actually is ingrained in this organisation. They're passionate about, they're really disappointed about how we're perceived at the moment, but that just makes this organisation more determined than it's ever been to be much, much better. So what was a negative, we can turn that into an absolute positive because of the determination of 70,000 people that get out of bed every day and want to do good things.
How frustrating is it to be at the head of such a big organisation, making the changes and yet having the government own 62.5%? Is there anything that you've wanted to do that you couldn't?
Now look, so I think having the government as the cornerstone shareholder of this business while we've gone through such transformational change from global to local, and had to make all of the decisions we've made that have been very painful, they have been a great shareholder. You know, their time is coming where they want to get out, and I think our private owners want them out, but they have done an outstanding job for this bank to stabilise this business at a time when it could have been very, very disruptive on the register. And their interference is next to nothing. We have a meeting with UKGI once a month because they are our largest shareholder, and we treat them like a large shareholder, just as we do other large shareholders, and they get information. Only the amount of information is only what our major shareholders get and is public. But they're very interested in the bank.
But would you have taken more risk if the government, I'm not trying to trip you up, but would you have done anything differently?
No, I don't think we would have. I mean, the only issue that the government ever got involved was around remuneration. And it was really around my remuneration, it was around senior executive remuneration. We ended up for this 1-for-1 where the rest of the industry got 1 base and 2 bonus. And to be honest, it hasn't made a big difference to the vast majority of our colleagues at work. It was about the only issue. The rest of it, they've let us get on with a job, doing the job, and they've been very arm's length, and that was their stated purpose when the bank was invested in. It was an arm's length arrangement, and they've honoured that. But we wouldn't have taken any more risk. I mean, this bank went broke. So we are probably the most cautious of banks on behalf of customers and behalf of our shareholders. I'm carrying the highest level of capital probably of any bank in the UK, you know, the big banks. We've got the highest probably levels of liquidity at the moment. We feel quite safe about that. And one of the most wonderful challenges we've got now is how do I get some of this capital back to my shareholders?
Ross McEwan, what has been your worst day at RBS so far?
I think the worst day that I've had actually happened this year when I was accused by the Treasury Select Committee of lying to them. And that really hit on personal integrity for me, which I have endeavoured to build a reputation here in the marketplace about being absolutely truthful and telling it as it is. And one of the questions, which I thought was in a complete context of what we were talking to, seemed to be then later taken out, and I'll take it as a misinterpretation on my behalf, and I've apologised for it, but that was probably the hardest thing to deal with, when your own integrity is being totally questioned when you've built a reputation around that. And yeah, I think it was probably the toughest.
But how do you overcome that? I mean, is it a personal challenge, or is it...
That to me was a real personal challenge, and what was, I think, marvellous on the day that it happened, so many of my work colleagues, including every one of my executive team, said, this is a disgrace. This should never be happening to you. They've charged gone after the wrong person, and I had numbers of people, of clients and the board, massive support. But and I think I put it back to it was a misinterpretation of the question that was asked, and then, but you know, I've apologised for it because that was never my intention. And I think that was probably my hardest day of 5 years of running this business.